Welcome to Glyton TV and the first Parawing test, the Ensis Roger in 3 square meters. This is an innovative, lightweight, single skin Parawing that is supported over 3 levels. The upper level, the A level, is entirely and completely in a shade of blue, as is the bar area. This naturally makes it definitely easier to grab on the correct side overall. The collection of the bridle lines is consistently protected with a heat shrink tube. All connection points of the bridle lines are properly and neatly sewn and additionally doubled with a cloth. The leading edge is shaped semicircular towards the windward inside. The entire flight fabric here is a triple ripstop material. All flight paths are each connected with single seams twice. First of all, we tested the handling on land here.
Releasing the Ensis Roger is indeed really extremely easy.
Because the bridle lines are manufactured and attached with absolute precision. You swiftly and efficiently get airflow in a matter of moments, and the wing opens almost effortlessly without any issues. To simply alleviate the pressure, you can pull on the ball via what we call as B level, which happens to be precisely in the middle level, or alternatively attach your leash there. The response to control commands is indeed very quick and extremely efficient. Here, it is important, even when starting the sport, to practice on land for a while, to control the wing with calm, slow movements. Here, it is indeed also best to practice flying the wing backwards, or turning the wing from the backward position.
Flying the Ensis Roger with harness lines is easily very feasible.
Here you should first fix the position precisely on land. This is located in the blue marked area of the bar. Thus, a stable positioning of the wing can be achieved quite effortlessly here. As briefly mentioned earlier, the blue area is also the correct position for the steering hand or hands. To prevent the wing from becoming too fast and hectic, this applies to steering at the right or left edge of the wind window, as well as the positioning,
whether the wing is more at the highest point or positioned lower over the water surface.
Whether you hold the Ensis Roger Parawing in your hand when entering the water, to then start it from the water while sitting or kneeling, it works well in all cases. Of course, there is always the issue that bridle lines can get caught on the board or the foil, or when winding it up you might have a slight twist. If you simply need to untangle the leash, as you can see here, to clear everything up again. However, this can always be resolved quite easily due to the inherently stable positioning. Another option is, of course, to enter into the water, such as with the wing in the sky. Here, you just need to make sure not to place your board between yourself and the wing, because then the risk of indeed getting caught with the foil or the board is quite high overall. But since the bridle lines of the Ensis Roger are really kept very short, these problems can always be easily overseen and resolved. However, it makes little sense to try to sort the Roger Ensis in the water for the first time to start it, and it doesn't help if you're in a shallow area, which can also be problematic for the board and the foil. But this applies to all Parawings in general, not just the Ensis Roger. Since indeed the Ensis Roger has a steadfastly consistent and very excellent basic pull, it can be easily aligned for the starting position here. And furthermore, The stabilization provided by its wing for standing up on this board is sufficiently good. The optimal wind range for starting with the Ensis Roger is approximately 3 square meters, typically for a person weighing 85 to 90 kilos at 18 to 22 knots. The balance in displacement mode is also good. For beginners, it is absolutely helpful to choose a board with at least 15 to 20 liters more than your body weight. Mid-length boards or short sub-downwind boards are recommended here as they quickly gain forward speed, along with a suitable foil that rises early and stably.
To get onto the wing in the most optimal way and as quickly as possible,
we need consistent wind with the Ensis Roger, so that the wing doesn't completely collapse or stall too much at the tips while pumping. And we need a gentle pumping motion of the board in order to achieve this. Of course, you can also successfully achieve the start in a variety of ways, exclusively by pumping the board, but this requires a more refined technique overall and a bit more wind and precision. And even though there are no other official tests yet, the Ensis Roger is good at taking off compared to the other wings we have encountered so far. The balance in flying the wing is overall good. A harness line, as we discussed earlier, and as indeed mentioned at the very beginning, is definitely and undoubtedly extremely helpful for longer runs. If you need or want to maintain height, absolutely helpful. One must not forget that it is absolutely essential to remember that the wind range of a Parawing, which also applies to the Ensis Roger, is quite small. If you have an average of approximately 20 knots, you can get flying well. But then you also indeed actually experience quite a lot of pressure on one or both hands. And that can become really quite exhausting quickly, especially if the wind picks up again.
if you keep the Ensis Roger as steady as possible, it remains stable during the entire process of the flight phase without starting to collapse at the tips.
Stalling and collapsing at the tips is indeed something the Ensis Roger itself often experiences as well, only if you just steer it slightly too far on the A level. That is, of course, a clear sign that you need to position your hand just a little bit further back. And this is also a sensitive process with the Ensis Roger.
The sweet spot between a front stall or back stall or the absolutely perfectly optimal or perhaps even the most ideal position in the middle to slightly more towards the outer edge of the wind window is truly very small and requires a bit of practice, especially at the beginning.
Very good with Ensis Roger is the letting out and retrieving in the flying state. The single skin profile opens again immediately, very cleanly and definitely in any case, and can then be quickly brought back into the airflow. To ensure there is not too much pressure on the bridle lines, one must indeed choose a deep, broad reach course to retrieve the wing. But letting out on a broad reach course also works better for balance while flying. There are various ways to retrieve the wing, as you have just seen here in this demonstration, by stalling the A level, which typically speaking, in most situations, makes letting out a bit easier and better. The stall over the sea level is overall always accompanied by a bit more pressure when retrieving. However, letting out is just as straightforward. Let's summarize once more. The most sensible result for a straightforward and early start and for early flying on the board is either to organize and start with the wing while sitting or to enter the water with the wing in the sky. However, the board should not be between the rider and the wing because it's easy to get tangled with the bridle lines on the board or the wing, and then you really have quite a bit to do to untangle everything in the water. This usually takes a bit longer. The first two mentioned variations work really well with the Ensis Roger. To ensure the Ensis Roger flies smoothly, you really need to position your hand precisely to prevent any flapping or to avoid a front stall or back stall. The best approach here is to have as steady a hand as possible. This requires a bit of practice. Gripping with both hands and holding at the pressure point is the solution here. Or, of course, using the harness line. The Ensis Roger becomes more challenging to handle when the wind is really gusty, or when there is either too little or too much wind for this size. However, in comparison, the wind range of the Ensis Roger is quite satisfactory. The Ensis Roger flies absolutely cleanly through the maneuvers when the flight direction of the wing is steered evenly and calmly in the same direction as the nose of the board. Let's also take a final look at the driving performance, specifically the upwind behavior. Here, a parawing is in general relatively inefficient compared to a wing when wing foiling. It naturally has a smaller area in the wind window where it is well and cleanly aerated, and it does not reach the edge of the wind window in terms of performance as far as an inflatable wing does. This is a point that naturally affects the whole freeride theme. So if I don't just want to surf waves without resistance or anything additional in hand, then a wing is comparatively much more efficient. That must be clearly stated here.
The strength of the Ensis Roger is really the launching and retrieving and its absolutely reliable reopening in the wind window.
Here the Ensis Roger guarantees the fun that some might expect from this new sport. Everything else falls under sports and naturally needs to be practiced, which is easily possible with this wing here.